Yeah, if more than 180 countries believe Taiwan is part of China, how can China allow a part of China still being separated from China? It's just as simple as that. So we would never tolerate Taiwan's independence. Taiwan will be back. The only question is when and how. It's not a question of if.
That, I must say, sounds, Senior Colonel, like textbook old order big bully behavior, of the kind that you've often criticized the West for.
No, because we're still talking about peaceful reunification. People always talk about the stick part of our policy, but but people have forgotten mainland China has actually offered a lot of carrots. For example, those children from the Taiwanese families could go to kindergartens, and the card we issue to them is very much like our own, ID card, and we're giving them more and more preferential treatments. It is the Taiwanese society who refuse these kind of offers because they are afraid that the more the two sides become integrated, the more Taiwanese people would be, attracted by the men.
刚才这段对话，主持人一上来就把霸凌、双重标准、道德失格一股脑扣到中国头上，仿佛只要中国不按西方剧本出牌，就天然站在了错误一边。可问题是，国际政治真有这么简单吗？一边高喊规则，一边在加萨持续失守时保持沉默，一边要求中国谴责这个。制裁那个，自己却把贸易、军援和地缘利益算得清清楚楚。面对这样的质问，周波大校没有回避，而是从联合国、俄乌冲突、加萨局势，一路谈到台湾、南海以及中国模式，逐层回应西方秩序究竟是不是一套真正普遍适用的规则。尤其是台湾问题上，从什么时候、用什么方式到和平统一的拉扯，更是把双方分歧彻底摆上台面。大家好，这里是嘎人四绝频道。本期节目，我们就跟随这场针锋相对的访谈，看看中国究竟是在挑战旧秩序，还是在揭开旧秩序的另一面，也看看那些听起来冠冕堂皇的批评，能不能经得起事实和逻辑的追问。正片马上开始。
No country is more central to that conversation than China. President Xi Jinping says China rejects hegemony and offers a more multipolar world built on sovereignty and non-interference. But does its conduct match those principles? Beijing has refused to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It maintains deep commercial ties with Israel as Gaza lies in ruins and the West Bank burns. And Taiwan contends with the permanent threat of military force. My guest is retired Senior Colonel Zhou Bo. He's one of China's foremost strategic voices and a former senior officer in the People's Liberation Army. I ask him, is China offering a genuinely different world order or simply a different distribution of power? Senior Colonel Zhou Bo, thank you very much indeed for joining us. The international order is under enormous strain. President Xi says that China is the keeper of the international order, that it upholds the authority of the United Nations. This sounds great in theory, but in practice, what has China done that entitles it to make that claim, you think? I'm glad you mentioned Gaza because the Gaza genocide is clearly a failure of the Western liberal order. China had the chance to take the moral leadership here. But what has China done instead? You've condemned Israel's actions, but you're also the world's biggest exporter to Israel, the third biggest importer of Israeli goods. That doesn't sound like moral leadership. That sounds like business as usual.
Well, I think you are just mixing politics with the economy, right? I think China's attitude towards the Israelis' massive killing is clear-cut. Yeah, nobody would ever doubt about China's strong condemnation of what Israel has done. But China is different in the Middle East because it is the only country that actually has befriended almost everyone before this war. So China's position in the Middle East is considered quite impartial and neutral. And that actually raised people's hope as to what China can actually do to solve this problem, or even, as some people say, could fill in the so-called vacuum. China would not fill the vacuum.
But the fact that you're trading with a country that's committing ethnic cleansing, committing genocide, isn't that a moral failure?
Well, I don't believe any international would prohibit us from having kind of a normal trade relationship, because this kind of transaction has been done even before the war, right?
I'm saying this because circumstances call for different measures, and clearly the condemnation, China, other countries, is not working. It's creating no pressure on Israel.
No,
and hence the possibility of sanctions
No.
very much is on the table. Why would China not consider sanctions?
Well, you see, the sanctions do not always work. And for this question to be asked, and I believe the right people for you to ask is the United States first, yeah? So, because they are the countries that right behind Israel, I always argue, yeah, Israel is America's Achilles heel.
But let's come to Taiwan, Senior Colonel, and tell me if here China's actions do not translate into direct hegemonic behavior. It's a tiny island of 23 million, the majority of whom in poll after poll say they do not want to live under Beijing's rule. China's response has been to fire rockets, simulate air and naval strikes, basically threaten invasion.
Well, I think you are just putting, Taiwan as an independent country, while more than 180 countries, including India, and the United States, all these countries consider Taiwan to be part of China. So we are still having patience. Yeah, we still look for a peaceful reunification, but they have to behave. Yeah. So in certain circumstances, actually three kind of circumstances, according to China's anti-secession law, we might resort to use of force. But I hope that would be the last resort.
But when you say they have to behave, do explain to our viewers what that means. If a majority of the population do not want to be part of China, identify as Taiwanese, surely there has to be some respect for the will of the people.
Well, I mean, they have to behave because the ruling party is the DPP, who actually champion a kind of Taiwan independence. And it's under their leadership, we basically have any exchanges across the strait. But this DPP-led, authority by Lai Ching-te even refused to consider Taiwan to be part of China. That is a big problem.
Right. You're talking about the current president of Taiwan, Lai Ching-te, but I was asking more about the people, because quite outside of whoever's in charge, if a growing number of people, and I'm quoting a Pew poll from 2024, which said 80% of Taiwan's young consider themselves Taiwanese, not Chinese, 2/3 consider China as a major threat to their sovereignty. Again,
well,
this is the public view.
No.
Surely that's something that China should respect.
No, this is not the whole of public view, because you will have different polls. Actually, the latest poll shows that actually young people are really, happy to see what was happening in mainland China, and more people actually are coming to work in mainland China.
So I'd be very interested to see polls which actually show a reverse, because these polls show very big numbers. 80%, 60%, 70% would prefer to remain Taiwanese and not have Chinese control. But again, just coming back to the idea of what that would mean, Senior Colonel, because the fear is surely that if there is going to be greater Chinese control, then you will have repression, you will have the stripping away of a freer society. They're looking at what happened in Hong Kong with the protests and the way that China cracked down, and I'm not sure if they want to go there.
Well, you are just looking at this issue from the eyes of some Taiwanese, but as a mainlander, I can provide another angle. Just think of this. If more than 180 countries believe Taiwan is part of China, how can China allow a part of China still being separated from China? It's just as simple as that. So we would never tolerate Taiwan's independence. Taiwan will be back. The only question is when and how. It's not a question of if.
That, I must say, sounds, Senior Colonel, like textbook old order big bully behavior, of the kind that you've often criticized the West for.
No, because we're still talking about peaceful reunification. People always talk about the stick part of our policy, but people have forgotten mainland China has actually offered a lot of carrots. For example, those children from the Taiwanese families could go to kindergartens, and the card we issue to them is very much like our own, ID card, and we are giving them more and more preferential treatments. It is the Taiwanese authority who refuse these kind of offers, because they are afraid that the more the two sides become integrated, the more the Taiwanese people would be, attracted by the mainland, which is the fact. Because, China now is the center of gravity almost. Of course, the Taiwanese people would not be the exception.
So there could be a difference between seeking economic opportunities here to actually being governed by China. But let me move on, Colonel. I'm not disputing that China has made rapid strides in terms of economic success. But again, the fact is that internally, there is no way for people to actually signal whether they're happy or not, because there are no pipelines of feedback, there's no pipelines of dissent, there's no public opinion that's allowed.
No,
which could be critical of the regime. President Xi is essentially elected by about 3,000 of his party colleagues in a country of over 1 billion. A majority of Chinese have no say in determining who elects them.
Well, you do not understand China's elections system, because we just have different election levels at different constituencies, and these people are represented at each constituency, and those people at the higher constituency would to vote for this kind of leadership.
But it's still a one-party system. There's no alternative.
Well, no, you're wrong. In China, it's not one party. We have many other parties, but the dominant party is the Chinese Communist Party.
I mean, the other parties are essentially supervised by the Communist China Party. But when you talk about people being happy, Senior Colonel, are the Uyghurs happy? The UN Human Rights Office report of August 22 says that China's abuses in the Xinjiang region may constitute crimes against humanity.
No, I don't think so. Because if you look at the world, ethnic problem is always most difficult to resolve. Yeah, and if you look at the people in Xinjiang, actually the life is becoming longer. Yeah, and if you,
not according to the United Nations.
Well, the life is certainly much longer because people's living standards are much higher. This doesn't need any statistics. This is just a common sense. Yeah, if you just Google easily whether the people in Xinjiang's life are getting longer, the answer is definitely yes. How can you just convince me that their life is just becoming shorter because of politics in China? This is impossible.
This is not me saying it. Human Rights Watch says hundreds and thousands of Uyghurs remain imprisoned as part of the government's crimes against humanity in the region.
No, we do not. We do not describe it as such. We had a time when some of these people would have to go through a kind of re-educating center where we actually teach them all kinds of techniques. So it's not about what you have described as a prison. No, we do not have so many prisons.
这场访谈真正值得我们回味的，并不是某一位嘉宾在某个问题上的输赢，而是他把一个越来越尖锐的问题摆到了我们面前。当一个国家宣称自己维护国际秩序、反对霸权、尊重主权时，我们究竟应该听他怎么说，还是看他在关键时刻怎么做？从整场对话来看，中国提出的是一套颇具吸引力的叙事。他强调联合国的权威，强调国家主权，强调互不干涉，强调通过谈判、调解和安全保障来解决冲突，也强调自身的崛起没有像历史上的一些强国那样大规模对外扩张。这些理念对于经历过战争、制裁和强权干涉的许多国家来说，确实有现实吸引力，特别是在西方国家一边高举规则旗帜，一边又在乌克兰、加沙以及中东问题上表现出明显双重标准之后，越来越多国家开始怀疑，所谓基于规则的国际秩序究竟是普遍适用的规则，还是强国可以选择性使用的工具。但是问题也恰恰从这里开始，一个秩序是否公正，不能只看他反对谁，更要看他是否愿意把同样的标准用在自己身上。中国批评美国和以色列违反国际法，却没有用同样明确的语言谴责俄罗斯入侵乌克兰。中国强烈反对加沙的人道灾难，却又坚持把对以色列的贸易与政治分开。中国强调尊重国际法，却拒绝接受对自身不利的海洋仲裁裁决。中国反对外部干涉，却又认为台湾问题不属于外部世界可以讨论的议题。这些立场背后当然有历史、安全和地缘政治的考量，也有国家利益的计算。但对于普通观众来说，最重要的判断并不是中国有没有理由，而是这些理由能不能形成一套前后一致的原则。如果主权不可侵犯，那么乌克兰的主权是否同样不可侵犯？如果人民的选择值得尊重，那么台湾民众对于自身身份和未来制度的意见是否也应该被认真对待？如果不干涉是外交底线，那么当一个国家内部出现大规模人权争议时，国际社会是否就只能保持沉默？台湾问题尤其说明，国际政治中的冲突往往不只是地图上的边界争议，更是身份、记忆、制度和安全感的交织。北京看到的是国家统一、领土完整以及历史责任，台北许多人感受到的却是军事压力、制度差异和未来生活方式可能被改变的风险。双方都在强调自己的历史与法理，却很少真正回答对方最深层的恐惧。一个社会是否愿意走向统一，不可能只靠经济优惠来决定。 也不可能只靠军事威慑来推动。真正能够降低对立的，应该是可信的承诺、持续的交流，以及让台湾民众相信自身尊严、自由和安全不会被牺牲。这场访谈还反复触及另一个关键问题，那就是经济发展能不能替代政治权利。中国模式确实创造了巨大的经济成就，也让许多人的生活水平发生了根本变化。否认这一点是对事实的不尊重，但同样不能因为经济增长就自动推导出所有人都拥有充分的表达权，也不能把生活富裕与政治满意简单画上等号。一个国家有没有真正的民意反馈机制，不能只看街头是否繁荣。工资能买多少东西，还要看人们能不能公开批评政府，媒体能不能调查权力，少数群体能不能表达不同意见，普通人能不能在不受压力的情况下决定自己的政治选择。因此，评价任何一种国家模式都不能只看它的口号，而应该同时看3个层面：它能不能改善人民生活，能不能约束掌权者，能不能在面对不同意见时保持克制。只解决第一个问题，国家可能变得富强，却未必真正稳定；只强调第二个问题，却忽视经济和社会治理，也可能让制度失去现实基础，真正有生命力的秩序。必须在发展、安全、自由和尊严之间寻找平衡。同样，评价西方也不能因为他自称民主，就对他的行为免于审视。美国及其盟友在战争、制裁和地区冲突中的双重标准，已经严重消耗了国际社会的信任。西方如果希望继续谈规则，就必须首先接受规则对自身的约束。如果希望别人尊重人权，也必须停止把人权变成打击对手时才使用的武器。否则，所谓自由主义秩序只会越来越像一种权力秩序。而中国如果真的希望成为新国际秩序的重要建设者，也不能只满足于指出西方的失败。批评别人很容易，证明自己更难。中国需要回答的是，在涉及盟友时，能否坚持同一套标准；在面对争议裁决时，能否展现更大的法律自信；在处理周边关系时，能否让邻国感到安全；在面对国内人权问题时，能否允许更充分、更真实的讨论。只有这样，中国提出的多极世界、主权平等和反对霸权才不会停留在外交语言层面，而能够真正转化为值得信赖的国际实践。说到底，未来的世界不会简单的从美国主导转向中国主导，也不会因为多了几个大国就自然变得更加公平。真正重要的是国际社会能否建立一套不因国家大小、阵营亲疏和利益远近而改变的标准。强国可以拥有更大的影响力，但影响力越大，承担的责任就越大。国家可以坚持自身利益，但不能把自身利益包装成所有人的共同利益。一个政府可以强调稳定，却不能用稳定作为拒绝监督和压制异议的理由。这场对话留给我们的启示是，判断一个国家，不要只听他如何描述自己，也不要只接受他对别人的描述。我们要把承诺和行动放在一起，把历史叙事和现实后果放在一起，把经济成就与个人权利放在一起比较。只有经过这样的对照，我们才能看清谁在维护规则，谁在利用规则，谁又在试图重新定义规则。国际秩序正在变化，但变化本身并不等于进步。新的世界格局能不能比旧秩序更公正，取决于所有国家是否愿意接受同样的约束，也取决于普通人是否愿意持续追问权力、战争与和平的真实代价。欢迎大家在评论区分享你的看法，你认为中国提出的多极世界是真正不同的秩序，还是权力中心的重新分配？面对台湾、乌克兰和加沙这些问题，国家利益与普遍原则之间应该如何平衡？欢迎点赞订阅，观看更多精彩视频。